Well, here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with the noise death industrial power electronics group, the Atrocity Circus, who recently put out their latest record, Malpractice. And I'm talking with all the members of the band, or collective, as they refer to themselves on Bandcamp, comprising Dan Dolby and Thomas Ott, who also play together in Catafalque, and Existent, Nonexistent. And you may recognize this name. I have actually made music with Existent, Nonexistent, or ENE, as I might sometimes call him, who is, as the name that I keep using suggests, anonymous when it comes to his musical ventures. So it was really cool for me that I was going to get him involved in this call. And if you're watching this, if you're wondering why he's wearing a mask, that's why he's wearing a mask. And I think, in fact, this was the first time that ENE actually spoke directly, like in real time, with Thomas and Dan. So it was really cool to have everyone all together at the same time to talk about the record, which is a great, intense, kind of overwhelming, atmospheric barrage of noise and sampling. And yeah, it's quite an experience to listen to. And it was really illuminating conversation from my point of view, kind of getting an understanding of sort of the background of these different elements. And we talk about noise and we talk about different electronic music and different kind of forms of expression. It was really, really, yeah, it was a cool conversation. And I'm very happy that I managed to get everyone together for that. And you perhaps might be wondering to yourself, if you have followed this podcast at all, what's going on? It's Friday. As I mentioned in the previous episode with Charming Disaster, I have a bit of a backlog of interviews. So for the next few weeks, for as long as I can kind of cope with it, I'm going to put out 2 episodes a week. So that's why we are here. And yeah, with projects like this involving music that came out a few weeks ago, I think this came out on the 25th of April. I didn't want to leave it hanging around for too long before I put it out. So that's why we are here right at this moment in time. And so you can check out the album digitally on Bandcamp. If you'd like to get a CD copy, you can get that from Cursed Monk. And if you'd like to get a cassette copy, you can get that from Eggy Tapes. But if you go to the Atrocity Circus Bandcamp page, you can get links for everything else that you would want. And what else to say? Yeah, Dan, at the time that we were having this conversation, was on tour, or at least maybe not tour exactly, but he was playing in Ireland with one of his other musical projects, Mastiff, who are also very well worth checking out, more in the kind of sludge realm of metal with kind of, yeah, I'm not going to get locked into trying to describe exactly what they sound like, but they're more a metal band in contrast to the electronics and the noise of the Atrocity Circus. But they're well worth checking out. And as well as playing with Dan in Catafalque, Thomas also has another active project, Gnarl, a doom noise project, and has just recently put out Sanctuary. I think that was at the end of March that came out. So you can check that out on Bandcamp as well. I will put links into the description. And Existent Non-Existent is always making music. And so, yeah, I will try and put in the most relevant links that I can in the description to check out the various other work of the guys. But yes, you can go check out the Atrocity Circus on Bandcamp, and I will play a track at the end of the episode and a little clip before we start the conversation. You can follow me on various social media at Tom Osman Sounds. You can go to tomosmansounds.com to check out what I'm doing musically. In fact, I am working on a project with Existent Non-Existent as we speak. And otherwise, yeah, subscribe, like, comment, such things that help algorithms, I suppose. But, you know, just the fact that you're here, I appreciate that. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. And Dan, Thomas, and Existent, Non-Existent of the Atrocity Circus, take it away.
I'm
Oh,
here.
there is.
There you
There we all
go.
are.
I didn't
Nice.
even have to
Hi,
leave.
Dan. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too. You're right, Tom. Both
Dan,
Hey,
Toms.
nice to meet
Tom,
you guys.
existent, non-existent. Great to be with all of you at the same time. Now, is it right to call you Tom? Are you Tom or are you Thomas?
I'm Thomas.
Okay.
I call him Tom. I think it probably annoys him.
Nah, not at all. My answer's pretty much anything, but it
Tom, it
gets
is then.
confusing
Tom, it
when there's
is.
another Tom.
It is also a little bit confusing with me because Thomas is on my birth certificate, but I've grown up getting people to call me Tom. But then at a certain point, I realized I'd messed up because my passport say Thomas, and I was like putting on my bank accounts that I was Tom, and then it all just turned into a shitstorm. So now I'm even more confused than ever. Like, am I Thomas or am I Tom? Shouldn't be such an existential question. So anyway, we have all of us together here because we are here to talk about the Atrocity Circus.
Mhm.
And I guess the best way to start with this, because I think Thomas and Dan, if I've got this right, you both actually started the Atrocity Circus back in 2022, and you were both part of the first album. I've forgotten the name now. Yellow Teeth, was it? Yellow
yeah,
Crooked Teeth.
yellow crooked teeth, indeed. Yeah.
So I think the two of you had already worked together before, but how did the Atrocity Circus start?
Well, we're in a band together called Catafalque. We've done a few albums and a few shows as well. We just wanted kind of with Catafalque, we'd kind of gone more towards doom with the noise in there as well. So we thought we'd try and get back to our sort of noise, power electronics, death industrial kind of roots, really. And that's where the first EP came. I'm in another project with Matt Finney, who did the vocals or spoken word vocals on the first EP, and he jumped on to do some spoken word stuff, which he does really well, and it kind of came from there, really.
Yeah, that is a cool part of the latest record when you do have that spoken word kind of in the middle of the album. I wasn't sure at first whether it was a sample from somewhere, but it was just recorded for the album.
Yeah, Matt does it all himself. He wanted to do more, but unfortunately, he was a bit busy, so he couldn't sort of put his time towards it. But it's cool because we got to get Thomas to do some growling and stuff on this one, which we didn't have on the last one, and I like it very much because it kind of differentiates from it. So
Yeah. So before we get on to existent, non-existent, and your involvement in this, Thomas, what do you generally think of as being what you contribute to musical projects, and how much does that vary?
Um, yeah, it probably varies on what I'm doing. With Atrocity Circus, it's one of these brilliant things where I'm never really sure what I'm contributing. Even with the latest album, I send Dan some stuff over the internet, and then this amazing alchemy happens where he does things with it and comes back with these tracks. The vocals make it a bit easier because they kind of stand out, but in terms of the noise and bits and pieces, I can often I tend to record in one take, and I can rarely remember what I've sent through to Dan. So but what I love about Atrocity Circus is that kind of like sending stuff through. It's really organic and natural, not overthought too much.
Yeah. And so whether ENE you want to tell me, or Dan or Thomas, how did this become the three of you working together?
I honestly don't even remember.
it's
I
just
think
cool.
I think I think I heard you guys' EP and I loved it. I reached out to you and asked if you wanted to put out one of my albums, which was the Gehenna album on your Trepanation, Rest in Peace, which you very gladly did, and I'm very happy that you did that. And then at some point, I think I just DM'd you over Instagram and said, "Hey, if you ever want to work together, I'm always happy to do it." And then you said, "Oh, the next you're working on." At some point, you got a hold of me and said, "Hey, working on the next Atrocity Circus. Do you want to be involved?" And I said, "Hell yeah!" So same as Thomas, I just sent you a bunch of my sounds that I created, and you just put together the beautiful album that is Malpractice.
That sounds pretty much spot on to me. Yep, that's how I recall it
I think
happening
that's
as well.
it.
So that kind of partly answers a question I was going to ask, which was about the way that you actually put this together. Because as some people may know, me and ENE have actually collaborated together, and we are essentially collaborating together at the moment. So I do know a little bit about how you work or how you can work. But I am interested to know, and maybe Dan, you might be the best person to answer this. Like for this particular project, what was how do you put this together when you've got, these two different inputs that are coming in terms of material for the album? How do you put it all together into the finished piece that is Malpractice?
Well, I tend to not have any preconceptions coming into it as to what it's going to sound like until I actually receive the sounds. Then I tend to take some time sort of listening to everything and get a feeling as to what direction we could kind of go in. And then once it does, then I kind of get on a bit of a roll. So once the inspiration hits me as to what direction we're going to take this particular release, then I go all in and spend every bit of time that I've got sort of coming up with the final product, really. So it's a very refreshing way to do things. I'm in other bands and things as well, and we sit there and we spend many a practice writing songs and rehearsing them to play live and things, and obviously then going into the studio and recording. But this is a completely different way of doing it. It's very much more on feel. Now, it might not be the same feeling that the other two get out of the sounds they sent me. They might have gone into a different direction. And that's the beauty of it, because everyone's brain works differently at the end of the day. So, I mean, we know, I knew that it was kind of going to be sort of a noise stroke power electronic stroke death industrial album. So the genre's there, but what comes out of that is all dependent on the sounds that these two talented guys send me. So, and then I kind of add my own sounds to it, try and sort of structure things into more of a song related kind of structure. This one with the sounds, I got very much a machine-like vibe from a lot of them, which lent into kind of the surgery element of the tracks and the artwork for the album. And then obviously with that and the way the surgery goes, I got sort of, I just kind of need some sort of repetition there, keep going propulsive, because you don't stop halfway through a surgery, do you? It's kind of, so that's where the sounds that I was sent took me. Then added to them and kind of turn them into what they are now, really. So, and I couldn't do it without these two. It's nice, and I do work on my own sometimes with sounds, but it's so much better working with a group of people. You can take things and you get things that you never would come up with yourself, and I love it. So, thanks, guys.
You're very welcome. Thanks for including us.
Yeah, there's a couple of sort of almost philosophical questions that I want to ask you about what you're creating, but there's a less philosophical and slightly more banal question, which is to do with genres, which I struggle with a lot of the time. And a lot of the time, the music that I listen to doesn't really neatly fit into any kind of genre category. And Dan, you've helpfully mentioned, some kind of reasonable reference points about noise, power electronics, death industrial. I wonder if between the three of you, you can help me and people in general to kind of define, like, what do these things mean? Because, like, if I think of power electronics, okay, I think of White House. If I think of noise, I don't know, maybe I think of Merzbow, but I guess noise can mean a lot of different things. Death industrial, I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking the Atrocity Circus is, but I don't feel like I really have a good handle on what these different things are. So can you help me with that?
Yeah, from my understanding and the way I approach death industrial, it's kind of like you've got your industrial music, similar to sort of the early throbbing gristle stuff, the beats, a sinister atmosphere, and you've got more elements from kind of dark ambient in there as well. So it's kind of like you've got this sinister undercurrent to it all. Now, power electronics is a lot more aggressive. So you've got kind of, like say, your White House kind of things. When me and Thomas were first talking about the Atrocity Circus, we was kind of like, yeah, we want to do power electronics, but we don't want to do the kind of confrontational power electronics that White House or Sutcliffe Eugen did. Basically, because it's all been done before. There's the shock factor, not interested in any of that. So, which is why we had Matt doing some of the spoken word things on there. Keep it more, I don't know, more current almost, and like, let's not just shock people and say shocking things for the sake of it, And you've got sort of acts like Pharmacon these days that she does a lot of power electronics, and that was the kind of sort of inspiration for that side of things. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for the old power electronics, and they paved the way for lots of other bands. But I wasn't really interested in doing it the way that they used to do it. Not music-wise is fine, but the whole aesthetic and the confrontational nature of it all. But yeah, it's a strange one within any kind of industrial music, I find, because when you say industrial, a lot of people just think of industrial metal. They think of Ministry, they think of Nine Inch Nails, they think of the beats that
Puppy,
sort of
stuff
Code
like that.
Orange, put into their music and things like that. But that's not really the industrial that I think of. Mine's more like your Throbbing Gristle and your early sort of experimental, sort of noisy kind of music where they came with like Nurse with Wound and things like that. And I kind of I kind of wanted to challenge this conception of sort of the industrial side of things, not just being about metal. Which I mean, a lot of people will obviously be aware of bands like Throbbing Gristle, but they probably wouldn't necessarily class them as industrial music, which they are. They coined the term. So
Yeah, exactly.
Noise. You're not far wrong with Merzbow. Merzbow is very noise orientated, but that's one of the things I like with noise is you can take it in so many directions. You can go for your full sort of harsh noise walls. You can do a lot more mellower stuff, which is noise, but it's still noise at the end of the day. And that's what I love about it. Things tend to get pigeonholed a lot when it comes to different genres, and I think with things like noise, it can be so expansive.
Yep.
So I feel like I've talked for ages then. So give someone else a chance.
That was all good. That was really helpful and illuminating. But I do now, don't worry, I have a question for the guys now. So, I mean, ultimately for all three of you, but Dad, I'll come to you last. So I was thinking it would be interesting to get a little bit of your each individual stories of, I think between all of us, I'm sure we have a fair amount of crossover in terms of stuff that we're inspired by, some of the less mainstream, more avant-garde, more noisy, or whatever else, industrial, etc., sounds, music, sound art. I'm kind of interested to hear a little bit about how you all kind of got to this point of the music that you're making or the sounds that you're making. So maybe E&E, let's start with you. I know from our conversations that you are a huge Nurse with Wound fan, but
Massive.
Can you paint a bit of the picture about what's kind of got you to the space where you're making the sounds that you make and the Atrocity Circus?
Okay. For me, it started when I was really young. My dad had a pretty decent record collection. He had some pretty shitty stuff, but he had some good stuff like Led Zeppelin 2, he had all the Beatles albums, and he would play the White Album around the house, and he would always skip over Revolution Number 9, and I'd be like, why are you doing that? And that, I started listening, like I was probably 6, and that song, that piece, I just gravitated towards. I thought it was just the most brilliant thing ever. And then I listened to that, and I had no idea, like, the context, the background, like Stockhausen Cage, all that sort of stuff. I had no clue, like music, concrete, all that sort of stuff when I was that age. And then in my teens, I'm a drummer mostly. I've had to quit because I've wrecked my shoulder in an accident a few years ago and I haven't been able to drum. But I grew up playing in punk bands and kind of industrial metal bands when I was younger. And then when I got to university, I discovered like John Cage, Stockhausen, and I started collecting Nurse with Wounds, Throbbing Gristle, Current 93, Eisers and Neubau, and I started getting kind of into that sort of stuff. And when I was about 20, I started to experiment with tape loop machines because digital was kind of just on the cusp. Didn't really know much about it. So I experimented with tape loops and percussion and field record, like very basic field recording. And then I got involved in a few more bands I played with for a couple more years that actually really liked that I did that sort of stuff. And then from there, I started buying samplers and synthesizers and a theremin, messing around that way. And then at one point, a friend of mine says, "Hey, you're really good at this stuff. You should think about going to audio engineering school." So my now wife, girlfriend at the time, was like, "Yeah, if you want to do it, let's do it." So I went to film school, became an audio engineer, went for a year, worked at a studio for a bunch of years, and kind of honed my craft that way while I played in a few more bands. And then took a hiatus because I started having kids, and being an artist and trying to work a full-time job with a family became very difficult. And I wanted to be as present with my kids and my family as much as I could. So I put out my album, Nothing Comes From Nothing, probably like 25 years ago. That was my first album, solo album. And I actually lost it. I didn't know where it went. And so I never released it. And then I just stopped making music. I sold off a bunch of my equipment. I handed off. I stored some of my mom's basement. Some of it I kept and moved around with me. Meanwhile, I collected a whole bunch of records. I had a great record collection for quite a while, like a lot of old European free jazz stuff, a lot of noise, musique concrète. I've kept a bit of it, but I had to sell it off again for money and family reasons. But that was kind of my training, was listening to those records and really getting into them and learning about what they are and what they do and that sort of thing. So flash forward 20 years later, I had an accident at work, which almost killed me. So I have been convalescing probably about 3.5 years now. I've had multiple surgeries, and the blessing in disguise was I had a lot of time on my hands, and I had kids who were a bit older who didn't really need me as much as they did when they were younger. So I decided to start getting back into it again. And I realized that a lot of the digital equipment that was extremely expensive 25 years ago when I was trying to get into it was a lot cheaper now. So I was able to start building up a studio space over the last few years. And that's what I started doing. So I resurrected Existent, Nonexistent. And it actually, in all honesty, literally saved my life, because I probably wouldn't be here if I hadn't had this project to bide my time with and to get involved with. And I'm a very creative person. I like photography and music. And so I was missing that part in my life. And luckily, unluckily, the accident forced me back into it. And I realized that I had a lot of creative energy and a lot of ideas I wanted to get out. So that's what I did. And then, I just started making albums. I go back now and listen to my old E&E stuff, and the stuff now, it's gotten a lot better because I was relearning how to record again. It's like working a muscle. It goes away if you don't use it. So all my recording chops that I had and stuff like that were lost. And so now I'm just trying to regain them back again. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And, I don't think I've been through anything as traumatic as your accident, but I can completely relate to what you're saying about creative outlets. Like, if I don't get the opportunity to have some kind of creative outlet, I mean, I kind of have the same thing as well with exercise. Like, if I can't go for a run, or if I can't make something kind of artistic in one way or another, I
Yep.
will go crazy. Like I
Yeah.
have to do it. It's an absolute
100%. I have to
requirement
do
for my
I have to do
soul.
something every day. I have to do something creative every day. Whether it's take a photograph or a field recording or because of my accident, I have a lot of depression. I kind of go in and out of depression and stuff. So I don't always get the inspiration that I'm hoping for, and I hate forcing it.
Yep.
So if I'm in a depressive state, I still come down to the studio, and I coined it like fuck around Fridays. I just plug stuff in together and I run it all and just see what I can come up with. I just kind of randomly create stuff. And then I'll take that and run that through more plugins and stuff and just see what I come up with. And generally I will have a couple of things that will pop out of that will, kick me in the head and go, these are great. I'm going to use these as a new piece. And then the inspiration starts from there. And then I start creating based off of those sounds that I get. I got a huge library of sounds for my fuck around Fridays. They're not always on Fridays, but
in principle.
Yeah, in principle. And so those are the things I drew from for Dan when he asked me to join the Atrocity Circus. I went into knowing the EP and loving it so much. I kind of had an idea of some sounds that maybe would work, but I also sent him some sounds that I thought were a little more esoteric and weird in hopes that he would use them. And he liked them, and that's how it all kind of started.
Yeah, that's very, very cool insight. So, Thomas, your story, please, sir.
Yeah, it's funny. I think there are a lot of parallels here, and I was kind of nodding along there and kind of really recognizing bits. I think my story kind of boringly probably side more in the kind of metal end of things. And I think what I've always loved about music is like massive atmospheres and dense atmospheres. I like kind of pieces you get lost in and you're almost kind of shocked when it comes to an end. Or, I mean, there are too many times where I'm really enjoying the kind of long ambient fade out and I realize the music's finished. I'm listening to my computer fan and ambient sounds again. I kind of, it was kind of getting into kind of extreme metal, black metal that kind of started me down that route. And then I think a bit like Dan, we both discovered Sun through the same Terrorizer review, which just blew my mind. I couldn't understand what this music was going to sound like. And this was Flight of the Behemoth. So I ran off to Newcastle, bought that album, and it just completely blew my mind. I'd never heard anything like that music. I mean, at the time, listening now, it sounds fairly tame, but at the time, I felt like I was listening to a factory made by H.R. Geiger. It was just different to anything else I'd heard, and that was me kind of hooked from there on out. There was also, at the time, there were a few small kind of underground bands in the UK doing what I think they were calling ambient doom. So people like Proman Wildschberg, and I hate that because I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing it properly, and Methuselah. And what amazed me about these guys was there's like one of them was like a one-man act, and I'd not really come across that before. And I was kind of the only person in my high school into extreme metal. And I thought, well, if this guy's doing something, couldn't I? So then I kind of started experimenting with a ton of like pirated software and like broken equipment at home and managed to record a terrible EP. But it was kind of getting started, and that was kind of I went from there. In uni in Edinburgh, I organized an experimental music night with some friends, playing kind of like industrial dark ambient, neo folk, which I'm maybe not as keen to admit to anymore, and some older industrial. And that was kind of really then started kind of like exposing me to a much wider range of stuff, started getting into noise. And it was around that time I really got into field recording too. Still got the field recorder I bought then, and it's still the backbone of most of the music I do. I absolutely love bringing those sounds in. But weirdly for me, it was actually having kids got me more into music. Before I had kids, I almost had too much time, so I never finished anything. I would spend years working on an album, and by the end, I'd hate it and not release it. But after kids, I really wanted to kind of carve out some time for myself. And at that point, I formed my noise project, The Dead Yesterdays. And at the time, it felt like there was kind of a Facebook scene taking off. There were loads of compilations and things happening. And I really kind of forced myself to kind of every week I'd have like a night in the garage where I'd spend some time doing music, and then I'd kind of mix up and release whatever recorded. And I've released tens of releases over that year. Most of it's probably awful looking back, but I learned more and I improved more that year than I had in like the previous 10. And it totally kind of changed my approach to music. And it had some really fortuitous kind of benefits. Like I met Dan for a few of the things. We did a couple of collaborations. I had tracks on a few of Dan's compilations, and that's led to our other band Catafalque, to Atrocity Circus. So it was really kind of putting myself out there. And yeah, really grew as a kind of a musician going through that.
Yeah, and that's really interesting.
I think I'll leave it there.
even even though in some ways you were coming from quite a different starting point than ENE, it is interesting that there is that overlap with some of the elements that you went through. And so Dan, obviously, as Thomas has mentioned, there is overlap in your stories of the things that you've been involved with, but maybe you can share your side as well.
Yeah, I've been in bands since I was probably about 13. Started off covering metal stuff and then going on a bit more of a noisy doom trip. Then I gave up for about 13 years, didn't do any music of any sort whatsoever. And then probably about 10 years ago now, I started getting back into doing the sounds. I've always sort of played around with bass, not like the bass guitar and stuff. So that was kind of the starting point of my musical side of things. And I've always kind of enjoyed electronic music. My dad, when we was growing up, we used to listen to a lot of sort of Yazoo and sort of Gary Newman and things like that. So I've always been interested in kind of the electronic side of music. And I really got into kind of Nine Inch Nails, which in turn got me into Coil because they were remixing some Nine Inch Nails stuff.
Yeah.
And then Coil in turn got me into listening to Throbbing Gristle because obviously there's the parallels and links in between them. And a lot of the music that coming back to it, I'd kind of listened to a lot of sort of Aphex Twin and things like that. So unfortunately, my noise music was me trying to sound a bit like Aphex Twin and failing miserably, but it turned into noise and it was fine, you know? So I tended to move away from doing any kind of beats and just doing like the more atmospheric stuff.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of dark ambient. That's kind of something that I really enjoy making. Just kind of invoking sort of a sense of sort of suspense and dread. And I just find doing the music very therapeutic. I do suffer quite badly from sort of anxiety and depression. So it's kind of the whole being able to actually sort of compose the music and do the things I want to do by myself. It has been so therapeutic. But when it kind of comes to working on your own, you miss out on something, you know. It's kind of like you get caught in your own space and your own head, and you're kind of doing these things, and sometimes you kind of need some fresh input, which is like, I think the first person I probably collaborated with properly was Thomas, and it just sort of opens up a whole new world. You're getting, I think I mentioned it before, you're getting sort of sound sent to you that are things that you would never come up with yourself. And, you know, working with them, chopping them up, adding different bits to it, it's just a completely different way of working, and one that I really like. And, you know, I try and sort of do different things with music, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, every failed attempt to do something is you learning at the end of the day. And I've learned loads of how to use the software, how to sort of mix, how to master things, you know, and it does change your life being able to do sort of the music. And I know I'm in a band and we do quite well. We've played some decent festivals, done some tours and things like that. And that's great. again, I love the camaraderie there, but I can't get to do what I love to do, sort of electronics wise and things with the band, So it's just having that other outlet, just to kind of, you're having a shit day, start up your laptop, get some noise recorded, and it really does make a difference. I'm an advocate for sound therapy. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So I don't know where I'd be without having the opportunity to make this kind of stuff. And I think the advent of more affordable sort of ways of recording and the software and the free sort of soft synths that you can get, and even the effects, it's remarkable, really. And I'm sure there's many people around that feel the same. I know unfortunately, a lot of people that I know that do noise have had mental health issues as well. I think it brings us all together in some kind of weird way. But it's therapeutic and it does help,
Mm-hmm. It is really interesting, because from my side, in terms of like the interviews specifically that I do, so I've got this like wish list of the people that I most want to talk to. And I often say to people, like, fortunately for me, my ultimate heroes tend to be people who have languished in obscurity throughout their careers. So the fact that like my heroes are people like Jarboe and Steve Austin from Today Is the Day, and like Steve Von Till and Michael Gira and Eugene Robinson from Oxbow and from Bunwell, these are people that you can actually get access to. Like, it's not necessarily a given, but it's possible. If my heroes were the Rolling Stones and Drake and I don't know whoever else, but it would be Mick Hucknall from Simply Red. It'd be a lot more difficult. But what I was thinking about the other day was, this is not a downside, but it's just an observation that I made, was that a lot of these people are traumatized, or they're damaged, or they're dealing with mental health issues. And so that's this community that I'm in. And in a way, I love the fact that I get to talk to these people, but I just I become aware with a lot of the interviews I do. I'm like, wow, I'm talking to people a lot of the time who are struggling through things. And a lot of the time the music does have that therapeutic element for them. And sometimes that's a big part of it. It's like they're doing it because it actually provides a certain comfort in one way or another.
Yeah, it's you get a release out of it as well, especially when you can be there and you can just be ragging around different boxes. Thomas has got loads of weird noise devices that are cool, springs and things, but it's like, after you're doing that, you kind of forget everything else, and your focus is clear, is solely on sort of the noise you're making. And I tend to do everything with headphones on myself, and it blocks everything else out. So it's just literally, you're there and it's this space, and you don't have the capacity to really think about too much else, because everything else is such a sensory overload taking it over. So I love it. It's great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I very often find myself listening to some really extreme sounds, and I think, like, not even necessarily what is wrong with me, but like, why is this so kind of satisfying? What is this giving me? Why do I need this?
It is a strange one, and I have asked myself that many times, and I've not had an answer. But I just enjoy it. There's no particular reason why.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm the same way. I seek out the weirdest, strangest, out there music that I can, because I'm kind of like a junkie in that way. I get it, and then I have to get it more, and I have to get more, and I have to get more of it. Right? Like, I have to find it and take it all in. Like, I find pop music offensive. I have a lot of people who love pop music and hate noise music, and they say pop music around me. I'm like, I find that super offensive. And they're like, well, I find your music offensive. Like, well, I guess we'll agree to disagree. But I fully know where you're coming from.
On a slightly different tack, but still talking about the sounds and the music that you make and what you're attracted to, I was pondering this as well, that, I don't necessarily ascribe to the view that all music is political, but I was thinking, well, if you go back to like 100 years ago, Nazi Germany, maybe a little bit later than 100 years ago, or more recently than 100 years ago, Anyway, my concept of time since COVID has been completely fucked. I don't know what is forward and what's backwards. But back in Nazi Germany, there were certain things like surrealism, for example, that was just like, this is completely suppressed because even though you might look at surrealism now and go, there's nothing political about that, it's somehow viewed as being contrary to what the like prevailing system is. And it's like, if you're interested in doing this, something's wrong with you. Like you don't have the right kind of mindset. So I was wondering, in terms of what you guys are doing, I don't know whether you've consciously thought about this before, but do you think what you're doing has a political aspect in the sense that it is so abrasive and so kind of sonically confrontational a lot of the time?
I personally don't go into it with any political leanings.
And I don't mean like an agenda. I don't mean kind of like, it's like it's left wing or it's right wing, whatever. But do you think that it is a political statement to be doing what you do, or you just don't think so at all?
I suppose it could be. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do is kind of more probably of a statement of the current state of the world and the state of the different countries we find ourselves in, which in turn, I suppose, is political.
Like a kind of a social commentary.
It is, but probably more of a subconscious one. It's like, you see the news every day, and yeah, I think it gets everyone fucking angry. You know what I mean? So that has to be channeled in some way. So I suppose there's some subconscious view that this is a an outlet for getting your anger out at a political situation. I don't know whether you guys would agree with me on that one, but I don't.
Yeah, I think that was really well said, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Dadaist movement. Again, that was in the 20s, and they made art to throw art in the face of artists, right? Like they were taking toilets and saying this is art. So I think from my standpoint, like if you look at my Instagram page, I have on there a tag on there saying even anti-art is art. So that's kind of like a Dadaist thing. So I like to make my music as weird and as Dadaist and as esoteric as I can. And I never really thought of it as a political statement. It's more of that's just kind of what I like, the art movement, the Dadaist movement, the Surrealist movement, and what it kind of stood for, which I guess is a political thing. I don't really think of myself as political. That's about as far as I go.
Yeah, I think what you're all saying makes a lot of sense to me, because maybe that's part of the reason why I never felt entirely satisfied with this statement that all music is political. I'm like, well, from the way that I'm getting from you guys, it's like there can be an expression, like a reaction, but it's not kind of a conscious, like, here is my statement, here is my manifesto.
Yeah. See, and I grew up in the, the 80s and 90s punk movement, right? And that was all very political. And it just wasn't my thing. I just wanted to hit my drums as hard as I could and make loud noise. And now I've kind of moved that into the more electronic noise, cut up music concrete type world. And
yeah. Thomas, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't know. I'm not sure if it's political per se, but I've always been really kind of drawn to almost that postmodernist kind of death of the author kind of approach to this. I really want to make things which are meaningful for people, but I don't necessarily want to sit here and dictate the meaning to them. And I think that's what I really kind of love, particularly about the new Atrocity Circus. There's a ton of different kind of like themes and ideas all running through that. And I'm hoping, like for some, it might just be noisy relief from day-to-day life. Others might find meaning in the titles or in the lyrics or in the kind of atmospheres we're creating. And that's kind of what I want to offer, that kind of space for people to find their own meaning in it, rather than kind of setting out a stall and telling them what to think.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I agree.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that's a very good way of looking at it. Because I hadn't really sort of conceptualized this postmodern death of the author concept quite in that way. But when you say that, I think like, oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. Providing something that's meaningful without dictating what the meaning is.
Mhm.
I think the thing is, we have so many people thinking that it's okay to dictate to us on a daily basis the way we are, the way we behave, sexual orientation, everything. You know, I think when it comes to the stuff that I do personally, I don't want to dictate to people. If they think that it's something, they think of it as being a statement about something particular to them, then great. But you make your own mind up. It's kind of, I don't want to sit there and tell you what you should be thinking about this thing. And, I'd rather you listen to it. If you like it, great. And if you find some kind of sort of solace in there or some kind of thought, brilliant. But you find it yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to tell you what it is.
Yeah.
And I think probably we can all three of us listening to the album will probably think that things are about something else and pick up something different about it. And that's the way that music should be. I don't think you should be spoon fed and told that this is what this is about. This is how you should feel listening to this. But just feel how you want to bloody well feel. You know what I mean? It's like sick of being told that this is the way we should be and people trying to stamp down other people. It just gets enough,
Yeah, indeed.
I don't know if you guys, I like to hide a lot of Easter eggs and cultural references in my albums and songs and pieces. Not so much from a political point of view, but more as like a nod and a wink to other people who would be listening to it going, oh, they get it. They listen to this, or they're part of this, or they have heard this, or they've watched this movie, or they've, like I like to hide things in there that maybe one person will listen and go, oh, hold on a second, that's kind of cool, or hey, they know about this thing. And I love doing that sort of stuff, but I don't do it from a political standpoint. I do it more as from a community standpoint. Hey, I'm part of your community, and some people get it, some people don't, and the people who get it really get it.
Yeah. That's cool. I definitely agree with that, and I like it when people do that kind of thing. It's like you kind of almost feel included.
Yeah,
exactly. He's like similar to me. Yeah, I get that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
I did want to talk about Cursed Monk Records because that's what you're putting Malpractice out on. So how did you come to work with them for the release?
Well, known Rog for quite a while, who runs Cursed Monk. I released some of his music as Noosed. He's in a sort of a two-piece, and I put that out on Trepanation when that was going. And we like similar things, and it's just chatting to him online and stuff, and he's always cool. He's always been a really big supporter and a big fan of Catafalque, and he actually released one of our albums on cassette. He wanted the last album, but we got it on vinyl, and he didn't want to do it on vinyl. So I told him he could have the next one, and Tom agreed, so that's fine. But he's just such a lovely chap. Works really hard, got a good work ethic, and always keeps up to date. He's just super positive about your release and things like that. So it's the kind of person that you really want to work with. And we're putting the cassette out on Eggy Tapes. They're a small tape label in Bristol, and they're proper sound, really nice people as well. And it just worked out really well. We thought, well, might as well approach people to put it out, because instead I put the last one out on Trepanation anyway. And considering that's kind of stopped, but I'll reach out to some folk, and luckily enough, they listened to it, liked it, wanted to release it. So that was always good. But yeah, Cursed Monk, they're a good label based out of Ireland. I met Rog for the first time on Saturday. We was playing
because you were playing in Ireland with
Cork.
Mastiff.
Yeah, played in Cork, and Rog turned up to that. Had a good chat. Lovely guy. So yeah, he puts out some great music on his label as well. I would implore people to give stuff a listen on there as well. Puts on a festival called Monkfest every year as well, which has some great bands on. You never know, we might play at some point. He was asking about it on on Saturday. I have to get E&E over to Ireland. Sure, you won't complain too much, would you? Yeah.
Sounds great. I'm in.
But no, yeah. So it was the first person we actually approached with the album to release it on CD. So and he wanted to. So yeah, I like Rog. I think Thomas, you're a fan of the stuff he puts out as well, aren't you? And
yeah, massive fan of Cursmonk. There are some brilliant albums out on there, and Roger's band you put out, Noosed, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, keep an eye out for them. They're recording a new album soon, so obviously it won't be out on Trepanation this time, but you'll probably put it out on Cursmonks.
There are different friendly places to go to.
Oh yeah, but it's nice to work with good people, you know.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people there that wouldn't sort of put the time in that they do, and there are a lot of people out there that won't want to release this album because it's quite abrasive, quite relentless, pretty downbeat. but that's all good stuff for me. So, but no, it's just lovely to find people out there that are willing to work with you, willing to put things out. So
yeah,
never take it for granted.
Makes all the difference, doesn't it? So almost like I'm not complaining about getting a Catafalque album out on vinyl. That was like a major milestone in my life, having music released on vinyl. But the whole process was so much more kind of corporate and legal with agreements, and I much prefer the more underground side of it, going with somebody like Rog, who's really passionate about music and just getting away from that whole I'm in music because I like making music, not because I want to be in marketing and needing to push sales and create social media posts and generate all that kind of stuff. I'm terrible at that, as Dan and E&E have seen, hate that side of things.
Yeah, I've been kind of sucked into it up to a certain point, but I'm trying to find the balance of how much time is actually worth putting into it. So thinking about the album which will be out when I post this, so there's the CD, there's the vinyl, there's digital downloads people can get from Bandcamp.
There's no vinyl for this one. It's a cassette. CD
did
and
I
cassette.
say? Sorry, I didn't mean to say vinyl. I meant to say cassette. My brain.
If anyone wants to put it out on vinyl, that's fine. But it's currently
the
not.
possibility of vinyl is there, but yeah, cassette, CD, digital download.
Yeah.
So you've floated the possibility that maybe you could do shows in the future. For this project, or for anything else that the three of you are doing, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or promote before we go our separate ways?
I've been in the studio with Mastiff. We've got a new EP recorded, which should be out at some point this year, on a new label, which I'm not allowed to tell anyone about yet, so I'll have to keep that quiet. We're doing a tour with an awesome band from Ireland called Worn Out in July, and then we're also doing a run of dates with Raging Speedhorn in the UK in November. So that'll be quite fun, I'm assuming. I think there'll be a lot of drunk, but I don't drink, so I'll be watching everyone get absolutely annihilated, probably.
Sometimes I've found from time to time it can be quite fun to just be observing that, like, all right, that's interesting. So that's what it looks like.
You see some sights, I tell you. But that's pretty much from me this year. I'm sure me and Tom, I know I'm working with E&E. I need to record some sounds, and we're putting out a sort of a split release. A collaboration actually, more than a split release, isn't it? So, and I'm sure me and Thomas will probably start writing some new Catafalque stuff with a view to probably record that next year.
I'm always working on stuff. Sometimes it takes a dip in creativity and I don't get around to things, and then sometimes I have just a a nuclear explosion of ideas and start putting stuff out right, left, and center. Working with this great guy named Tom Osman on another album right now, so I'm looking forward to to getting into
I
that.
look forward to hearing that, actually. Yeah.
The only album that I've been kind of proud of, well, one album I've been really proud of this year, other than the Malpractice, is I put out a cassette on drama recorder called .45454545. I'm looking for someone to put out on CD. I'd love to get it on CD or vinyl. One of my goals is to get my stuff out on vinyl at some point. So that's the album. That's one of the big albums I did last year. I'm in the process right now of finishing up another album, but I have no release date or when that's going to be out. I have no idea. But I'm always working on stuff. I'm always looking for collaborations. I'm always putting things together for compilations. I love doing like just little one-offs or compilations. I just enjoy supporting other labels. But yeah, I'm always kind of have stuff on the back burner. I've got lots of stuff. I just have to finish it up.
No, I dig it. You honestly, I'm not just saying this. You're an inspiration to me with your creativity and your output. It really kind of like puts a fire under me. And yeah.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate that.
So I think it's very cool.
You're about the only person I probably inspire, so that's good.
I'm sure that's not true.
Well, who knows?
Thomas, what about for you?
Me, main thing I'm working on at the moment is a side project called Nal, where I kind of combine drone doom and harsh noise wall. So I've got a self-released new album out, so I just wanted to go simple with it, get it out there, and get people listening to it. Sanctuary. So that is out now, and probably it's the closest I've come to the sound in my head with that project.
It is really good. It is really good, mate.
Cheers, then.
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm not just saying that either, but it is really good.
And I guess it'll be over by the time this is released, but the artier end of what I do at the moment in Glasgow, there is a kind of sound radio art festival happening. So for 2 weeks, they play 24/7. If you're in Glasgow, you can tune in on kind of a standard radio.
That's where I am.
Across the world.
I'm in Glasgow. I'm here. This is my city. What is this? I need to know about this. What is this? When is this?
It's called Radio Frenia. I think it's until Saturday. You can listen online as well. And I love it because you can just tune in and you have absolutely no idea what you're going to hear. Random drones, somebody taking a broom on a trip around India. But I was really chuffed to get one of my kind of artier drone pieces played on there last Saturday as well.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah. Like I say, you won't be bored. I can't guarantee what you'll hear when you tune in. It'll definitely get you thinking.
The beauty of randomness. Beauty of randomness. I love it.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely. And on that note, the beauty of randomness, E&E, Dan, Thomas, thank you very much. It was great to be joined by all of you and get to chat. It was my pleasure.
Yeah,
and yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for asking. It's been fun. Right, you take care. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Cheers.
Okay.